Hey everybody, my name's Bryce Young. I'm the president and founder of Warm Audio, and today I want to talk to you about our new pedal called the RingerBringer. So the RingerBringer, it's a ring modulator. It's based on a classic ring modulator you maybe have seen before. We tried to give a similar aesthetic look. Got our wood sides, all metal enclosure. It's an all analog circuit, sounds super rich and creamy, and gives you all that you'd expect from ring modulation. When I think of ring modulation, I think of bands that are going after a different type of tone or trying to add textures and layers to their mixes. Some bands that come to mind that I know for sure have used ring modulation, and maybe actually some have used this exact style of modulation, would be like Radiohead, Mars Volta, Incubus, Dream Theater. So if you look at the history of ring modulation, it comes from synthesizers that became really big in the 70s. And to have these types of textures and tones in your recordings or on stage, you typically had to have a very large synthesizer. Since the 70s and 80s, we've been able to put effects in much smaller sizes. Oftentimes though, they become digital. What we wanted to do with the RingerBringer is make sure it stayed all analog. We're really excited about bringing this very vintage style, all analog, luscious, gooey, just incredible tone into such a small box that nods to the 70s era with its look, but gives you that compact size that we all need in this modern day. What a lot of people use a ring modulator for is to sculpt complex tones. So they might add the RingerBringer or this style of modulator to another effect, so like a delay, an echo. It really gives more depth and texture when you're going for an out there type of sound. The amount of controls on the RingerBringer make it an extremely versatile ring modulator, but it also is versatile in its ability to be used kind of in any scenario. I personally am a studio guy, so I would use this in the studio. You could run line level outputs out of your interface to reamp through it, add effects to things that were pre-recorded. You can put it on a guitar pedalboard, run a guitar through it, bass, synth, keyboards. It can take line or instrument level and really be used in any application. All right, so let's talk about the controls of the RingerBringer, but I also want to talk about the size and construction. So we wanted to keep the cool aesthetic look, having the wood sides. We wanted it to be built out of metal for durability. And we wanted to have the same features as the original, but we wanted to make it a bit smaller. And so we made it as small as we could, being pedalboard friendly. And you'll see on the backside, it has quite a lot of connections that we needed to still keep the width. But overall, it fits very nicely on the board. You've got connections on the top side, so they're not creating extra space in between your other pedals on the board. So now to talk about the front panel controls, we've got the LFO amount in the upper left-hand corner here. And what that does is that changes the depth of the wave. So you've got either a sine or square wave, depending on this neck switch down here, and that depth of how long and how high and low that goes is controlled with the amount. And I just mentioned here, you've got the square wave and the sine wave switch. And I always love the square wave sound. It sounds kind of robotic versus a sine wave. And then we've got here below that, we've got the rate. So that's going to be the speed of the LFO. And if you see here the low frequency oscillator right there, you can see that light blinking. And as I turn that knob, it's going to speed up or slow down, of course. Now, here in the center, we've got the drive knob, and what that does is it controls the amount of gain or signal that's coming out of the pedal. And the drive knob is active even in bypass mode. So when the foot pedal switch turns off the pedal, you can still control the amount of volume. And so that is an active bypass. Then next, below the drive knob, you have a LED that shows you how much level is running through the pedal, but also helps you control clipping. So it gives you various colors from yellow to green to orange to red. Red meaning clipping, just to make sure that you're not sending too much signal into the unit or that the drive isn't turned up too much. I mentioned a moment ago, you've got the LFO indication, which is great. And then you've got bypass here so that you can see when the pedals in bypass are activated. Then next on the front panel is the modulator section. And the first knob in the upper right-hand corner here is the mix knob, and that's going to control the wet or dryness of the effect. So if you have the mix knob turned all the way down, You're not getting any of the effects mixed in with your guitar or synth signal. At 50% up, about 50% of the signal is going to be mixed in with the ring modulator tones, and then at 100%, you're only going to be hearing the ring modulator. So the last feature on the front panel is the frequency select. There is a low and a high switch so that you can select between hearing really low, deep frequencies or really high frequencies. And then once you've selected if you're going to use low or high frequencies, this knob down here allows you to have a complete variable adjustment of the frequency at which the modulation occurs. So let's now talk about the back panel. You probably were expecting just to see an input and output on the back, but there's quite a lot more going on here. So let's go through it. First of all, you've got your audio input, which everybody's going to need to connect either your synth, your guitar, or whatever instrument you want to run through the ring modulator. So on the top row here, these next inputs are actually inputs for an expression pedal to be able to take over the controls on the front of the pedal. And so you've got a rate, an amount, a mix, and a frequency expression pedal input. Then the last thing on the top row here is just your standard 9-volt center negative power supply input, and the unit does run on 9-volt battery as well. On the bottom row, we start with your audio output, which is going to be the output that you'd see on any effects pedal. Your standard unbalanced instrument cable would come out of that. Then you've got your LFO out. And what is that? So a lot of people won't need this or use this, but if you are into a lot of effects processing, specifically for synth collectors, the LFO out is really handy to be able to send the low frequency oscillator's signal out of this pedal and into another pedal that can accept it. So the last two jacks on the back side of the RingerBringer here are the carrier input and the carrier output. So the RingerBringer runs on two different oscillators. One is called the LFO and one is called the carrier oscillator. The carrier input allows you to send a different signal into the RingerBringer to control the carrier oscillation. And then there's also an output to send the RingerBringer's carrier oscillation out to another device. Thanks for taking a moment with me today to learn about our wildest, newest, funkiest creation, the RingerBringer. If you have more questions about it, please check us out at warmaudio.com. We've got some videos and sound samples there as well. Thanks again. Take care.